This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day or hiking or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, "You're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago." I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details. This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian software like Jira, Confluence, and Trello help power global collaboration for all teams so they can accomplish everything that's impossible alone. Because individually we're great, but together we're so much better. Learn how to unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.com. Atlassian. Tap the banner or visit this episode's page to learn more.
Welcome to Beyond the Arc. The Nuggets beat the Heat 109-94 in Game 3 of the NBA Finals. And here to talk about it with me is the Ringer's Wosny Lambre. How you doing, Woz?
Kev, I'm good. I'm happy to be back on with you guys.
Thank you for having me coming on today. Appreciate it, man. Denver came out with a game plan, attacked the paint, 20 and 24 points in the paint in the first quarter. Second quarter, exploit the Miami zone. Miami goes with the zone. They come out with two design plays to exploit that, protect the paint on their end. Miami shot only 5 of 15 in the restricted area on non-tip-ins. They just couldn't get anything going there. And Nikola Jokic played a big part of that with his defense, his rim protection. But most importantly, we just watched a historic NBA Finals game. He was the first player in Finals history to log 30 points, 20 rebounds, 10 assists. He has 3 of them in his playoff career out of 5 in NBA history, 30, 20, 10 games. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is one of the others, and Wilt Chamberlain is the other guy. So we're getting some freaky territory here with Joker. He finished with 32 points, 21 rebounds, and 10 assists. It just felt like on Denver's way to potentially winning the finals. It seemed like one of those historic games by Joker as he cements his legacy.
Well, Kev, it's almost as if he played up to a level that would have justified a third straight MVP. but seriously, he was amazing tonight, particularly in that third quarter stretch where he starts out 5 for 5. He's doing the soundboard shuffle. He's one of the first shots was a pin down where he comes off a screen, catches and shoots a mid-range jump shot, and Van Gundy on the telecast was like, they're running pin down catch and shoots for their freaking center. It's ridiculous. To me, that was the difference in the game. When they went up by 19 in that third quarter, that run, the Heat couldn't buy a bucket for a while. They had a little cold stretch. And Denver being Denver, a.k.a. the best unit in the NBA, their offense, that is, unstoppable, with Jokic leading the charge. And I thought he blew the game wide open in that third quarter from all over the place, inside, outside. He even wet a 3 at one point. It was just incredible to see, Kev.
It's amazing how, I mean, you mentioned that shot that Van Gundy remarked about on the broadcast. I mean, he had a shot where he kind of just drove into the paint and softly floated it, like bounced a couple times off the rim. I mean, Bam Adebayo, I can't help but feel bad for the guy. He's busting his butt out there. I mean, he's doing everything he can, and yet Joker's having these historic nights. It just feels like he's the type of player that he is. There's nothing you can do but just pray he misses it. And if he gets himself into the paint, which clearly Denver was emphasizing in that game, attack. I mean, like that guy's got the best touch in the world in that area. There's nothing you can do about Jokic, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because I think the difference in this game also is Denver's ability to exploit mismatches on switches on their screen in action, right? So whenever a smaller guy ended up on Aaron Gordon, whenever a smaller guy ended up on Jokic, they ended up being able to punish it. The Heat, I think in the first half, they came out with a great game plan. They weren't sort of forcing the Jimmy stuff too much. They were just they were making Denver honor the shooters and the dribblers on the pick and roll and on the off ball action. And these guys were scared to go under every single screen, playing every single dude on the Heat as if he's like Mark Price or something. But because they played them so honestly, the Heat were able to exploit a lot of the holes in Denver's defense off of their screening action. I was really impressed by their ability to spread Denver out and get some legitimately great looks, right? Denver ended up pushing it to a 5-point cushion. I'm like, man, Miami's got to feel great about themselves going into the third quarter, knowing they've been a second half comeback team all season. They got to feel good about what's going on. But then Jokic, of course, just kind of slammed the door shut on their dreams tonight.
For sure. I mean, you're right. I mean, like Miami getting at the 5, it's like, okay. I mean, they're not shooting the ball well at all. They're like none of their stars, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, they're not having big offensive games. And then everything just, fell off for them in that third quarter into the fourth. Jamal Murray finishes with 30 himself. Christian Brown, I mean, an NBA rookie. It's not often you see somebody on this stage having a game like him. He finishes the game with 15 points. He plays 76 games this regular season. And that feels like, I mean, I'm just thinking about it during the game, like Steve Kerr with the Warriors. He's like, I can't trust Moses Moody. I can't trust Kuminga. But Michael Malone throughout the entire season plays Brown 76 games. Not heavy minutes, but 76 reps out there on the floor. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he was just prepared for this moment with the cutting, with the good decision-making, with his passing. And I mean, that dude, I mean, all year we've seen that, watching the Nuggets. This guy defends like crazy as well. I was amazed by him. And I know you're a big Christian Brown fan yourself.
I've been on Christian Brown since about January, honestly. There was like a little lull in the season where the Nuggets weren't defending well. And I'm like, I seen Christian Brown get some nice little minutes in the first half. And I'm like, this kid is huge, plays with an incredible motor. This is exactly what you need on the defensive end, right? He's not a complete zero on offense. He slots perfectly into what they're trying to do. And I thought tonight what I loved about it, again, the motor where this guy's just not stopping. He's diving after loose balls. Michael Malone is saying, look, go out there, guard Jimmy Butler, the best perimeter player on the team. I trust you. And most importantly, Kev, at many points, he was the zone buster, coming in on cuts, or he would do a pump fake, attack the paint, draw a defender, and then dish out to somebody. He was the difference. Of course, Jokic gets a lot of attention whenever he touches the ball against the zone, but in his action and his movement sort of broke stuff open. And I think Spoelstra is going to have to think twice about going back to that zone in future contests.
I mean, so you think that Miami zone, it's had success, throughout the entire postseason, through the whole season, and in the finals it has through games 1 and 2. But game 3, what you saw from Denver in those limited opportunities, like I said, Miami comes out with the zone in the second quarter. Denver's ready. They got 2 plays ready to go and create open shot opportunities. Your assessment watching game 3 is that at this point, with the time off between games 2 and 3, the Nuggets feel like a prepared team for that press falling back into the zone that the Heat have used so effectively?
Yeah, I never really bought into the idea that the zone was going to really stop anything. I thought in game 2, what it did effectively was, because Miami wasn't playing from behind and was sort of playing with a lead, what it did effectively was that it slowed Denver down, right?
Yeah.
Like the team that's chasing now they don't get into their offense until 12 seconds are left in the shot clock. Today, when Denver's up and it's like, we want to take our time anyway, there's too much shooting on this team, too much size to sort of see over the zone defense, and too much elite passing with Nikola Jokic to actually make this thing work in the way that you ultimately wanted to. You can have those moments where you disrupt the rhythm of Denver's offense. And let's face it, Denver is a rhythm offense, right? They can bludgeon you with the one-on-one isolation stuff with guys like Jokic and Murray and even Aaron Gordon when he's facing a mismatch. But what they do is rhythm and timing. and the zone does a great job of disrupting that. But it's not something that an offense this sophisticated and has this many ways. It's like a Swiss Army knife, Kev. That many ways to kill you. I'll kill you with a knife or a bottle opener. Like they have so many ways to take you out. Ultimately, I don't think the zone is the answer.
When we're back after the break, we'll talk about some potential adjustments for the Heat and also the Denver Nuggets. I still feel like with Michael Porter Jr., there's still ways for them to be even better. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. I'm still here with Wosny Lambre from The Ringer. We're going to be talking now, looking ahead to Game 4, which is on Friday. Only one day off between games 3 and 4 in the NBA Finals. You were just saying how the Nuggets just completely dismantled the Heat zone in Game 3. In Game 4, I think for Miami, for them, their lack of success on offense, I think a lot of it does start with their lack of success on defense. They got to get stops, create more early offensive opportunities. But with that said, Butler 11 of 24 in the game. Bam Adebayo, 7 of 21. Gabe Vincent, 2 of 10. Like, these guys just really struggled offensively for the Heat against the Nuggets. Do you feel like in that Game 3, there's anything that the Heat can look at and say, hey, this is just a cold shooting night, come back with the same game plan? Or is there anything you would like to see Spoelstra do in Game 4 and beyond?
So I said after Game 1, I thought the adjustment for them should be, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm Nostradamus or something out here, Kev, but I thought it would be their shooting. 1, making Jokic play out on the floor more, and 2, their off-ball stuff. They if you haven't played against that all season, it's really them and Golden State, honestly, who does this stuff with the multiple shooters, screening and cutting for each other, around the ball, not just on ball screening, but off ball screening and movement. I thought that would sort of unlock a lot of things for them. And we all saw the miscommunications between these guys with Duncan Robinson actions, not remembering who was guarding who on the switches. Oftentimes when they set the double screen, guys were getting confused. I thought that's where they would create their opportunities. And of course, we thought Jimmy Butler would have to have a more pronounced sort of imprint on the game. I think going into the next game, I thought they got some pretty good looks out of this. I thought Jimmy mostly got some good looks. He absolutely abused everybody who wasn't Gordon or MPJ on defense, and his eyes lit up. And when he drew help, he was firing that ball out. They would spray it around, and when they were getting good shots, I thought they ran good offense. The Heat run their stuff. They executed. They run it hard and with purpose on every play. You're never going to see a guy go set a screen and barely touch the guy. They're getting bodies on men, and they're creating space for their dudes. I just think they didn't make their shots. And, shouts to my man Seth Partner. I think the adjustment is going to be play better.
I mean, play better, definitely it's a given for Miami. I think also potentially getting new bodies on the floor. I mean, throughout the entire playoff run, they've been reliant on different role players to step up, whether it's Gabe Vincent or whether it's Caleb Martin or Max Strus or Duncan Robinson and all those types of guys, or Kyle Lowry having good games himself. Mm-hmm. Tyler Hero, I think Hero with his pull-up shooting ability out of pick and rolls, coming off of handoffs with Bam Adebayo, somebody who can reliably create quality shots off the dribble. If Vincent's not feeling it and if Martin's not feeling it, just having that other option, especially with Butler, he hasn't had a massive game since Game 2 against Boston. I mean, I don't know how much that injury is bothering him or he's just hitting a wall or what, but he just hasn't been the same guy that we saw earlier in the postseason. Getting Hero back, that to me, that feels like the big thing that the Heat need in this series to really, match the level of the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, I think Hero will help again. Like I said, another guy who's a threat to shoot it off the dribble, whether it's on a screen or even off of a pick and roll or even in the one-on-one. I think that's huge. But again, I think with Jimmy, I like what I saw from him tonight.
Me too.
He was attacking the smaller defenders with a lot of confidence and a lot of force. And it seemed like he had a little bit of explosion and some lift against those matchups, right? I think obviously people don't give Jokic his credit for this, but he's a huge deterrent when guys get all the way to the basket. Like, trying to shoot over him is tough. And I think Jimmy smartly, when Yoke was there, he passed out and allowed other guys to sort of create space with the ball movement and get some good looks up there. But yeah, Tyler Hero is going to be a great addition if he's able to come back with that hand. I don't know what his conditioning is going to be like. Of course, we know traditionally he hasn't exactly been Gary Payton out there on defense.
That's for sure.
So that's always a concern. But I truly do think Miami, if they're going to make a series out of this, if they're going to threaten to win the championship, Kev, they got to make shots. And that's what Tyler Hero does.
The one thing I'm afraid of if I'm a Heat fan right now, Michael Porter Jr.'s due was.
Can't make a shot. The guy cannot make a shot.
This guy doesn't stay this cold for that long. It just doesn't happen. If you look at his numbers over the course of the season, he'll have stretches where he hits, 25% of threes. But I mean, unless there's something injury-wise that we don't know about or fatigue-wise affecting him, I just don't think Porter's gonna have a fourth terrible game. I mean, he has stunk. And if Porter goes off and has a big night, it's good night to the Miami Heat.
Yeah, and it's not even about him making his one-on-one isolation shot creation stuff. It's making spot-up threes, man. Spot-up twos. These shots are catch and shoot. Usually his bread and butter that he's been flubbing so far in this series. And yeah, he's probably due. But, again, man, when you're able to create offense for yourself around what Jokic and Murray are doing, Murray, who we haven't even talked about. Oh, just a whole hump, 34, 10, and 10. Just another
and making
day.
Hustle plays too, man.
Hustle plays, all of it.
I mean, that rebound, right?
Yeah.
Remember that rebound in the third quarter where he chased down his own miss? Man.
Incredible, yeah. And so, Michael Porter Jr. is able to create off of that two-man action, which attracts so much attention from the defense. I think he'll be able to have at least a halfway decent game. Give me a 3 for 7. I mean, good Lord.
Last question was series prediction rest of the way. Nuggets up 2-1 right now. How's this going to end?
I picked the Nuggets in 6 before the series because of my respect and admiration for the culture in Miami. I do think they have an ability. They will have an ability to take another game off of these guys. As you've seen in certain moments of this game, Denver has had the moments of letting their guard down and focus down. A part of me still doesn't think they have the ultimate respect of Miami right now. And so I think there'll be lapses in focus and the Heat don't quit. We saw that at the end of the game. I'm like, all right, it's 2.5 minutes left. My lady's like, are you sure the game's over? Don't you remember game 6 in Miami? I'm like, God, it's over. Then it's a couple of threes, almost a flagrant. Like, we've seen these lapses in focus from Denver. So I do think Denver is going to spot them another game, but ultimately, man, this thing is going to end in 6. Denver is the team of destiny, as I so smartly and geniusly called back in October, Kev. The Nuggets will be hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy. Is it still called Larry O'Brien, by the way?
Yeah, the NBA Finals Larry O'Brien trophy. They redesigned it, but it's still Larry. Still
we making up new awards. We're renaming other awards. I'm forgetting.
Was I thought you said you weren't Nostradamus, but here we are. I have him as my guest here on Beyond the Arc. Thank you for joining me, Waz.
Of course, anytime, big dog.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A couple hours before the finals began on Wednesday night, we got some breaking news. Chris Haynes said that Chris Paul will be waived by the Phoenix Suns. That was later clarified by FanDuel's own Shams Charania, who said that it's possible he could be waived. He might be waived and re-signed to the Suns to the league minimum, or he could be stretched, which would mean that he would have to sign with another team, or he could even be traded. The funny thing now for the Suns is they're in a situation with their new owner. He makes a big trade for Kevin Durant. He hires a new coach, and now Chris Paul, a guy who did help create this situation that they're in now, they could be changing everything. And I think for the Chris Paul side of things, let's talk about that first here. If he's waived or stretched, my sources say the teams to watch out for are the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Spurs. all three of those teams in dramatically different situations. I think the Clippers are the best basketball fit of those three, because if he goes to the Lakers, you're taking the ball out of LeBron James's hands. And the Spurs, a younger team, it would be cool to see him with Wemby, but I don't think they're quite ready for championship contention. The teams I'm intrigued by, but there's no indication of actual interest. The Sixers, if James Harden were to leave, the Celtics, get them a point guard next to Tatum and Brown, and then the Bucks, somebody to help out Drew Holiday in that backcourt and create easy shots for Giannis. We'll see what happens there. We could see some point guard musical chairs this offseason. What does this mean for the Suns, though? That's the fascinating thing above all else here, because for Phoenix now, we've heard multiple reports. Chris Haynes says they will waive him. Shams says that all the options are on the table. And then Woj also followed up saying that they could trade Chris Paul or they could trade DeAndre Ayton. The Suns' new head coach, Frank Vogel, just raved about Ayton at his press conference. I don't buy it. I think Ayton is very much on the table. My expectation here for the Suns here, though, is they're trying to go for something big. And that's why they're leaving these paths open. Maybe they do waive him. Maybe they stretch him. Maybe they trade him. I think they're going to be going for Kyrie Irving, who's the name they've been connected to a lot, or James Harden. The Suns are more of a dark horse candidate for him if Houston doesn't work out, if he decides to leave Philadelphia. And that would also be an interesting thing for a Chris Paul potential destination. Maybe you trade Chris Paul for James Harden, but either way, now for Phoenix, they're looking for upgrades. They could trade Ayton, and if they do end up stretching Chris Paul or sign and trading him, or trading Ayton in a sign and trade situation for one of those guys like a James Harden or a Kyrie Irving, that would hard cap them, because under the salary cap, if you do a sign and trade, you are hard capped. That would mean they're reliant on their mid-level exception and league minimum exceptions in order to build out their roster around Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and whatever else they have on their team. They only have like 6 guys under guaranteed contracts right now. It's not a lot on that team. They got to fill it out with quality talent, but right now it's unknown. We just don't know every detail here with Chris Paul, but the bottom line is Chris Paul is going to have some options, maybe with those teams out west. And then the Suns themselves, they're looking to do something big this offseason. They're trying to create flexibility because they're going for it all. And that was clear as soon as they traded Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and every draft pick imaginable to go get Kevin Durant. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on this offseason, though. So to talk about that, let's take some questions from our Beyond the Arc listeners.
Nick Nurse was hired as head coach of the Sixers. Do you think this is a good hire? And what does it mean for Joel Embiid?
I like the Nick Nurse hire. I think for Philadelphia, it makes a lot of sense. He's a micromanager type, someone who's going to make a heck of a lot more adjustments than Doc Rivers did over the course of the series. I mean, ultimately, though, I think for Philadelphia here, it's what I think about the Nick Nurse hire is going to have to do with what Daryl Morey does this offseason. I wrote a column on The Ringer recently about this, and I kind of stated in there with Nurse that we saw him have great success with Kawhi Leonard. He has not been able to replicate that success since, but he also hasn't had a player anywhere as good as Joel Embiid. So how is he going to use Embiid? That might have to do with the roster, but I think regardless of what moves Morey makes, regardless of whether James Harden comes back, you gotta, I mean, this guy just won an MVP, and I still think there's more levels to his game. You can use him a little bit more like Giannis, more rebounds, go coast to coast, more stuff from the perimeter, downhill attacks. We're watching Denver right now in the finals with Jokic. You can put Embiid on more spots all over the floor, more off-screen actions, more pick and roll, and obviously Embiid lacks Giannis's verticality. He definitely lacks Jokic's playmaking ability. Jokic is on another level from anybody else on the planet. So Embiid can't do what they do, but I think Nick Nurse should bring in some wrinkles that incorporate some of the Giannis and Jokic style stuff. And I mean, ultimately though, like I said, what is the roster going to look like? Is James Harden going to go to Houston or to Phoenix? Is he going to come back? Would he be willing to adapt in this type of system? Probably not. The chances are, if he does, the offense just looks more of the same as it did under Doc Rivers. Is Daryl Morey targeting movement shooters? We don't know yet. Still a lot to determine. And funny thing is with Philly is now suddenly what they do could be roped in with what Phoenix ends up doing. Let's take our next question.
Hey, Kevin, what do you think the Blazers should do this offseason?
I mean, I think they are going to shop the heck out of that number 3 pick as we know right now. They're going to look around, see what's out there, but I'm skeptical that there's going to be any deal available that makes any sense to trade the number 3 pick in the draft, where you could end up with Scoot Henderson, a downhill attacking point guard, a potential leader in the future, a guy who could replace Damian Lillard sooner or later, or Brandon Miller out of Alabama, a tall, 6'9" forward who can score, who can play make, who can defend, chase down blocks. Like, they got 2 really great options there, and not to mention the Thompson twins. There's a lot of guys in that number 3 pick that would make sense for Portland to pair with Shade and Sharp. I mean, personally, I think they should be going young. I would look for trades for Damian Lillard and try to get what's best available, then build a youth movement here. The interesting thing is, they just added to their organization Pujetter, who is played for the G League Ignite last year, longtime point guard, played around the world. He said before he was hired on the Draft Deeper podcast that he said everybody should have Scoot number 2. So you got Pujetter, who's just hired by the Blazers in a front office / coaching role, and he's saying Scoot's the number 2 prospects. And to be fair, he's not just saying that because he was teammates with Scoot last year in the G League. He's saying that as somebody who also is longtime friends with Brandon Miller. He said so himself in that podcast. So you get Mike Schmitz, who is previously with ESPN and Draft Express, now second in command in that front office, who had great interviews with Scoot Henderson last year, really showed off Scoot's basketball IQ and his desire to be great. They worked out Scoot at number 3. It's interesting to see here, because if you draft Scoot at 3, if Brandon Miller goes 2 to Charlotte, which, I mean, we don't know if that's going to end up happening. It seems like, things are pointing in that direction, but still a long way to go. But if Miller goes 2 and Scoot goes 3 to Portland, what does that mean for Damian Lillard? I'd be looking to move him. CJ McCollum said on First Take on Wednesday morning that he thinks if he were a betting man that it's the end of the days for Damian Lillard in Portland. I'm not so sure there. I think for Portland, there's incentive for them to take whoever it is at number 3, whether it's Miller or whether it's Scoot, and just spin it forward with Damian Lillard and try to move Anthony Simons. And if you flip Simons, you get Scoot and Damian Lillard as your current and, past point guard with Dame, and then your future point guard with Scoot, and turn Simons into a wing or a better center than Yusuf Nurkic, who can't move his feet anymore. Like, they need to support Damian Lillard if they keep him. And if it doesn't work, then you can make a trade, and at that point, you move on from Damian Lillard sometime mid-season for a massive haul. So I expect them to go somewhere in the middle and try to play both sides, but I'd trade Damian Lillard this offseason. Let's go to the next question.
First time, long time here. You said how PJ Washington is an underrated free agent, but he's restricted, right? So the Hornets can match any offer for him. So in this upcoming class, who do you think is the most overlooked unrestricted free agent?
You're right. I really do like PJ Washington, but Charlotte can end up matching on him, and I think they probably should. I think he could help a lot of contenders. So if you're the Hornets, why not keep him? He's a great fit with Mark Williams there. He works with LaMelo. I would want to do that if I'm Charlotte, but we'll see. As for the unrestricted free agents, the guy that I'm looking at is kind of similar-ish to PJ Washington in terms of what he could offer a team. I'm thinking about Naz Reid from the Minnesota Timberwolves. In 12 games this season, when he played over 25 minutes, he averaged 20.5 points, 9.1 rebounds, 1.6 blocks, 1.2 steals, and he was a plus 4.1 average in those games. So that's a small sample, but he was crushing off the bench as well. We saw it in the playoffs. Anytime he was asked to replace Rudy Gobert or Karl Anthony Towns when those guys missed time, he came through. I think Naz Reid, he can space the floor from 3. He can attack off the bounce. And granted, he's not like a great defender. He's tough. He's solid. He can crash the boards. He's 264 pounds, so he can take on interior guys. If I'm the Spurs, I'm going after a Naz Reid because you're taking Victor Wembanyama with the number 1 pick. I don't want Wemby battling against Jokic or Embiid or any of these real beefy centers, even a Steven Adams type over the course of the season. I want Wemby in that help role. So I'm trying to target an interior center who can help him out. And Naz Reid makes a lot of sense because he works on offense, and on defense, he can kind of fill the gaps where Wemby's going to need it early in his career. Thank you for your questions today. We'll do this again in the coming weeks. We'll be back after the break talking about the NBA drafts. Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Today we're talking NBA drafts with some of the home run swings, these high-risk, high-reward players that you see teams willing to take. Maybe their GM ends up losing their job because they whiff. Maybe they end up with the next superstar. Tate, is there a player who comes to mind first to you that is the big home run swing in this year's draft class?
Yeah, I feel like the Warriors are the kings of this, where they have like the ESPN top 100 list, like just printed up somewhere like a big board, and they see guys that have fallen, and they're like, how is this guy the number one player, but now he is not in our top 30 on the draft?
James Wiseman.
Right.
Like, granted, he goes the top pick, but he was number one in this class.
Of course, and a guy who was number one in his class by most assessments is Gigi Jackson, who decided to, bump up a year, enrolls at South Carolina. Everyone stays in state at South Carolina, decommitted from North Carolina. But the USA basketball conversation around Gigi last year was high. I mean, everybody was high on this kid. They're saying he's going to be one of the most important prospects in quite a while for USA basketball. He had a detrimental first year in college basketball. I mean, that's probably to put it lightly. I remember specifically the Brandon Miller game, right? It just felt like these are two tiers of players. But if you do believe in the physical frame, if you do believe that he is young and that you can develop him and put him in a good system, there's a world in which Gigi Jackson looks like the biggest home run of this draft, especially if you get him late, in the 20 range, 18, 19, 20 range. I think that could be a lot of upside for someone.
I mean, he's 6'9". He's got a great NBA body and length and size and, strong frame. He can handle. He's fluid off the dribble. He's just not good at basketball right now. That's the thing,
Yeah, I mean, it's jarring to go into that level. It can be jarring to go into a certain level of like organized basketball
after skipping the year, like Tate said, right?
Yeah, and I think this term has kind of become popular in like draft circles, draft discussion circles in the past couple of years, which is this idea of pre-drafting, which is taking guys before they show you their sort of like their resume, their full resume. And you'll see this just with a lot of these weird year guys, these like freshman guys that just didn't have great years, and then you draft them and you get them in there. You bet on the talent. You were talking about the Warriors. Honestly, feel like the Lakers have kind of taken that strategy and like free
Max
agency
Christie,
and stuff. They were just like, we're going to go and just accrue these like top 100 RSCI guys. But I think Gigi, if you're going to take a pre-draft, I mean, he's somebody that would definitely be worth taking a swing on.
And he passes the airport test. Like, if we all walked in a room and you saw a bunch of NBA prospects, you're like, who's that guy? It's Gigi Jackson.
I think the Nets, with their back-to-back picks in the first round, like, they're the type of team that's perfect to me, or like the Utah Jazz, they have 2 firsts. These teams with multiple firsts, why not take a big swing with him? Because with him, we saw the flashes in high school. He didn't do well at South Carolina. It's a difficult situation, up and down year. He's on Instagram Live blaming coaches for not getting touches. There's some flags there that NBA teams are going to have to take a look at through their interview process and say, hey, is this actually somebody that we do want to gamble on? Is this a person, is this somebody that was worth it for us? But if you have 2 firsts, like you said, Tate,
if like the Magic decide to trade back, something like that. Yeah.
Like why not? Who comes to mind to you, Kyle, as home run swings in this year's class?
It's a similar thing. Like we were talking about, the weird year is kind of the branding that I've just been putting on it lately. And I feel like both of the Thompson twins are kind of lurking in that range where you'll hear people talking. The shooting is obviously the big question. Both of these guys are. You're going to have to either rebuild or completely reshape their mechanics, just figure out how to give the pluses. And they're both going to be elite athletes. I've talked about how Mann next year might be the best perimeter athlete in the league from day one. He's that type of stratospheric athletic talent, and he can get into the paint and give you playmaking. I just think that if you looked at the board and you said who could like ascend up this board 5 years from now, and we just kind of overlooked their gifts, I feel like Amen has some of that, but there's a lot of guys in this draft like this. Like Dariq Whitehead had a weird year. Nick Smith had a weird year at Arkansas. There are a few different places. If you have the picks and you have the stomach for it, you could have a bet that could pay out big with talent.
With Amen and Oscar Thompson, like you mentioned, their jumpers, that those need work. They've been hard at work. Like they did revise their mechanics over the season with the OTE, and yet their numbers are still underwhelming. Let's say they are never, 38, 37, 39, 40%, whatever it might be, 3-point shooters. And they're always going to be guys who hover between 26%, maybe a career high 32%. Do they still have superstar level potential with all the other qualities that they have, Kyle? Or do they need that jumper to be better in order to reach that level?
I think it's just got to get to the point where it's passable, because I think if you bet on like how long their athleticism is going to be
a passable
thing,
number? Like 31, 32%?
31, 32 would be. I'm raising my hands to the
Right.
Lord. That
Like,
would be
we won.
like,
Yeah,
we
we
did
did
it.
it.
So
We
it's
did
more
it.
like 25% is where you're a little.
you can't keep him out there. I mean, it's got to be like Tybal level. Like it's got to be like you got to be able to stay on the floor. And if he can stay on an NBA floor, I think these guys can. Yeah,
But even then, Tybal was losing minutes in the Sixers rotation.
it's true. Blazers fans love him though.
They do. They actually love him. He also started shooting threes suddenly well all of a sudden.
He also just seems like a great locker room guy. As
Yeah.
soon as he got to Portland, he's like on the plane. He's like listening to Dame Lillard rap. You know what I mean? If the Thompson twins are good teammates, that'll also help string it out. Yeah.
A lot of good food out in Portland. I think that would inspire anybody to shoot better, honestly.
I've never been out there.
You should.
I'd
You'd love it. You
I'd
gotta
love
go.
to visit
Yeah.
someday.
It's great.
Maybe. We'll see.
Portland Tourism by FanDuel. Yeah.
Cam Whitmore is the guy who comes to mind to me as one of the home run swings this year. He's 6'6", 235 pounds. He just jumps out of the gym. One of those types of athletes. We saw him at P3 just breaking, able to exceed the high jump. He is an amazing athlete. He explodes at the rim. The question with him is very similar to the Thompson twins. What level does his jump shot reach? He's been a below average shooter throughout, including in high school and his freshman year at Villanova. But the flashes of handle with his size and strength, I feel like he's somebody that at least you want to bet on. The floor for him is like, okay, he's going to be a good defensive player, versatile. He's going to be a guy who can attack closeouts, who can be used as like a screener type in an offense where you can play inverted styles. You can plug him into a Bruce Brown-esque role. I think he's at least going to be a competent shooter. But the question with him is, does he become a knockdown guy or a very good shooter? And if that happens, that's where suddenly that combination of physical strengths with fluid handling ability could manifest into a potential superstar level player.
Yeah, and I feel like Cam Whitmore is my number one guy that I feel as the draft gets closer and closer, we're going to see his name kind of climbing, where we
You can already feel it. It's
right,
happening.
4 or 5, right? Even the Pistons at 5 feels like a Cam Whitmore type team. So I just feel like his name, and maybe there's some, Portland floats out there. We like Cam Whitmore at 3 or whatever it may be. I think he's that type of player, that type of prospect. And I think he has the right people around him in that Villanova circle. So I really like Cam Whitmore. I think there's a lot of upside there.
I mean, he's going to be a top guy in the draft. So, I mean, there's probably a floor with him compared to some other prospects. Is there anybody else that haven't mentioned that you think comes to mind?
I have to throw this out. You mentioned the weird year. How about weird years, plural? There has been some very weird years for a guy, Amani Bates. But Amani Bates is someone that we all remember the cover, the next LeBron, right? I mean, there was a lot of pressure put on him. He goes to Memphis. Jalen Duren ended up being the best prospect on that team, and Penny and him kind of butted heads more than a few times. He ends up transferring back home. He has a solid year, has some good games. He still has that firepower to just go off for 30 points. I don't like his ability to get separation. I think that's still a question. He also physically doesn't really stand out. I think a lot of people projected him to be physically more imposing than he is. But I still think when you have a guy like Amani Bates and you have a second-round pick or, maybe late first round, you take a flyer on a guy and say, who knows, maybe he can be what he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Do you have any belief in him?
No, I don't. I mean, at this point, I just kind of feel like he's like a 6'7", 6'8" Bones Highland.
Bones Highland's a good comp. I like that.
I'll put it this way. I'm skeptical. I worry about, and this is the thing we go through with guys like GG, we go through with guys like Imani, is like the more that they kind of gravitate towards these situations that don't have total accountability, it tends to not go well, and you just pray that once they get into a situation where they are held accountable, they change kind of the way they play. Shane Sharp was a case of that happening this past year. Michael Porter Jr., an example of a guy who I said he should just be on his knees thanking the Lord every day that he met Nikola Jokic and ended up with him, because otherwise I don't know what would have happened to his play style. So it's different for every player. I worry about Imani Bates. I'm not feeling super confident about it.
We talked about it earlier in the year in the draft show, and I love to watch him play just because the way he just jacks shots up. He just does not care at all. NBA coaches are not going to feel the same way.
No.
And guys have not gotten drafted because they take shots away from other guys. And I feel like Amani Bates, there's only so many FGAs that are available for a team. And when you know a guy is planning to take 20 shots and he also doesn't have the talent to
20
do that,
shots in 12 minutes.
Right. It's like, get this guy out of here, And I feel like that's the real red flag for Amani Bates.
And that's where he's going to have to learn.
Mm-hmm.
If he does stay in this draft and he gets selected in the second round or he's an undrafted guy, I hope he goes to a situation like you're saying, Kyle, where they embrace him and say, hey, we want you to be you, but these are the things that you're going to have to do to earn minutes to succeed in the NBA and make tens of millions of dollars. This is what you got to do. Can you at least play some defense? Can you at least be willing to pass the ball? Can you at least just spot up from behind the arc and not pout if you don't get touches? If he does those things, I mean, we know Amani can shoot it. He's got size. He's got skill. He's got intensity. Let's see how he can hone that in the NBA. He could very well end up the steal of the draft, but I'm skeptical.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical, but I like Jerry West and the Clippers, you know what I mean? I like Pat Riley and the Heat. I think he needs kind of like an OG kind of culture team.
This is what I'm saying.
Him in a good spot.
Accountability. There are guys like that who, like DeMarcus Cousins was a guy who had a bad reputation coming into college. And if there's certain guys that if they get into a situation they respect, they can change. I mean, I hope it happens for Money. Like you said, the shooting talent is there, like the creation ability. It's not just that also. He has a lot to expand, like in terms of his body and how he plays. And right now, I think he profiles as like your second unit guy who comes in and has a big appetite for scoring.
Big spark.
But I'm not going to lean on him heavily with whatever I'm trying to do in my attack.
Well, I'm rooting for Amani Bates. I am. I want him to just flourish in the NBA. But we'll see what happens. Kyle, Tate, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, KFC.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Today we're talking about the NBA draft in the class's most versatile defenders. Victor Wembanyama is going to go number 1. Brandon Miller, a top pick as well, could go number 2 or 3. Versatile defender. But there's a lot of guys throughout, first round, potential lottery guys, late first, second round picks that, they end up panning out in the NBA and getting consistent opportunities because of their defense. Kyle, who comes to mind to you first as one of the draft class's most versatile defenders?
So many to pick from, and such an important skill set to stay on the floor in the playoffs, because if you're getting picked on, you're going to sit down very frequently. There's one quickly I want to mention, which is Andre Jackson, who was on the national championship team for UConn. He took on tough assignments. He gives you a lot of, he also is like a high assist to usage guy, one of the highest marks in the country. He gives you a lot of assists. He's great. One of the higher upside guys, though, that is probably, he's projected in the top 10 is Houston freshman Jarris Walker. Walker's 6'8", and he measured at a 7'2" wingspan. He's built a lot like Patrick Williams, who came out of Florida State. In fact, I've said this to you before, Kevin, but it made me wonder why he fits the prototype of a Florida State type guy. Like I wondered why he didn't go there, but one steal a game and 1.3 blocks per game, and that was 91st and 93rd percentile in the country. He's a guy who can move his hips really well, and in a league that is like spread out, we kind of had this movement towards lanky guys that could fly around, and I think we've shifted more towards, hey, strength is in fashion. It's important. It's nice to have strong guys that can move. Walker fits that mold, and I think he has enough offensive upside that I think he could become a winning player in the NBA.
Yeah, and he was in a winning culture at Houston. I love Sampson. I think he did a great job with him by giving him opportunity. He also didn't have to worry about being a mainstay of the offense. But as the year went on, there were times where you're like, Walker's maybe the most dependable player on the court for this team, which speaks to what he can do eventually in the NBA. And I like him on the defensive end because of that force and that size that he has.
I mean, and he's just so competitive. I guess that's probably one of the reasons why he went to Houston. That's a team that competes hard on defense, and Walker coming out of IMG, he's just one of those guys. You don't need to activate him or turn him on. He's always on the defensive end.
And he can play in a system, right? I mean, that's the other thing.
It's almost a good sign if you go to Houston, because if you agree to go to Houston, what you're signing up for, what you're signing up for. So it's like if you go there, you're telling me that you're a competitive. It's very similar to Florida State, honestly, in that way that that just says something about him. And I think it's another check in the box for him, personality-wise.
When I was in Houston interviewing, Brandon Miller from the Alabama side and then various Houston players, Marcus Sasser, Terrence Arsenault, a freshman wing for that team, I asked Arsenault, why Houston? He's like, because we compete here. I want to learn how to be a professional. And that's this common thread that you hear from a lot of the guys there. And with Jarris Walker, he's got defense as a foundation. That's why he's going to be a lottery pick. But offensively, he actually, I think in high school, he was taking the pull-up jumpers. He handled the ball a bit more. His offensive role was more expansive than what we saw at Houston. But at rim finishing, Tate, he's a connective piece as a passer. I think Walker has a lot of qualities that are going to make him a versatile piece on the offensive end too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what you tell yourself, right? The floor is he's going to be a great defender and a nice rotation piece in the playoffs, but the ceiling is he could turn into a guy who could be a secondary, potentially primary option if all things go according to plan and he develops into the player that he possibly could be. And he's young. He's a freshman, right? So, I mean, that's always something that NBA GMs love. We love potential. We don't always like players, but we love potential.
I have Walker on my board at number 8, and a player that has surpassed them at number 7 is Taylor Hendricks out of UCF. Hendricks, another freshman, not as highly ranked out of high school as Jarris Walker was, but Hendricks very similarly on the defensive end of the floor. He's somebody who can block shots for you. He's a good help defender inside. I could see him in a situation where you have him playing next to a big true center. He's playing the 4 for you as your big, long, rangy help defender. He can switch and defend multiple positions. There's a foundation for Hendricks to be one of those versatile pieces on your defense. And you look around the playoffs, I mean, the Aaron Gordon types, those guys are highly valuable to constructing a positive overall defense for your team. And I think Hendricks checks those boxes. And plus, he's just tough, man. Like, he takes charges. He fights hard. He has a high motor. Both Walker and Hendricks are super impressive, but I give a slight edge to Hendricks.
Yeah, and he has a wide variety, a wide range. He's like a nice button-up that you could wear with some slacks or some jeans, You can dress him up, dress him down, that kind of thing. I don't know if that works or not, but we'll say that it does.
It's a good analogy. I like it.
Yeah. But I think another thing, too, if you could reach back and look for, like, skill sets that we want to look for on the offensive end, you want to kind of get guys who have had the ball in their hands and they've processed a lot of action in front of them. They can make decisions. They can see the board. And on defense, I think in some cases, we've talked before about like Taylor Hendricks played center a lot when he was growing up. Paolo Banchero, another guy that played center a lot, had a lot of connectivity kind of in his brain. I think that he's going to be able to give you some of that like anticipation off ball, getting to the scene of the crime before the Minority Report thing before it takes place. That's a really valuable skill in a fast-paced game that is really, really intensive on decision-making in the NBA.
And coached by Johnny Dawkins, a guy who knows how to, basically get guys in the right position so you understand what it means to be this type of player. And then you mentioned some of the comps. I mean, even like what Rui Hachimura is doing on Jokic.
Yeah,
I think, Hendricks could be that kind of guy where he can match up with the big, but he also can get out on the perimeter if you need him. And that's a really valued skill set once you get to the playoffs.
And for me, the reason why he's one spot ahead of Jarris Walker is because of the confidence in his jumper. He's 39% from 3, much better than Walker from behind the arc. So I think for Hendricks, he's somebody that you could plug him in. He can be a spot-up shooter for you. He can attack closeouts, straight-line drives. He can roll to the rim. You mentioned him playing center more in high school. Good finisher around the basket. I just see him as one of those plug-and-play guys who can operate in different roles for your offense or for your defense and is going to have a long, successful NBA career. Tate, anybody come to mind to you as one of the most versatile defenders in the class?
Well, one of the names that I want to mention, then I'll get into my main guy, but Jalen Clark of UCLA is the best defender I saw in college basketball this year. So I wanted to say his name. I don't know if he might end up going back to UCLA, but
they missed him after he got hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, he was the difference maker. And if they had him against Gonzaga, we might be talking about the Bruins, being the national champions. No offense to the UConn fans. I know they'll be upset about that, but that's how talented he is. But the name that comes to mind for me is a fringe guy. I think he's number 40 on your KOC's big board. His name is Jordan Walsh, and he's not the name that you would hear a lot when you talk about Arkansas. Obviously, there were more high-profile guys that are there. You talk about Nick Smith, you talk about Anthony Black, but Jordan Walsh was my favorite player on this team because of his competitiveness, to be quite honest with you. And I like the way that he carried himself on the court. And one specific example that I remember, he picked up Ryan Nembhard, who just transferred to Gonzaga, little brother of Andrew Nembhard. He picked him up full court when Gonzaga played Creighton, and Creighton ended up winning that game, but that changed the dynamic of that game. And I love Jordan Walsh's versatility to be able to guard a guard, to be able to guard a wing. And if he gets switched on a big, he has the competitive nature that he will be willing to match up with them. He's 6'6". I like his ability to develop into a shooter, and he shot 48% day one of the combine from the three-point line. So Jordan Walsh is a guy that I know he might not be a flashy guy, but you're talking about a second-round pick that can be really, really of value for you.
Lanky, lean strength, I think, is something that you see guys that can get into traffic and get balls and pull them out. Like Kawhi is the highest example of this. I see your example, and I'll add you another example that we watched together in that Arkansas tournament game against Kansas. Walsh was switching him and David McCullough, another guy that I really love for Kansas, who I think could stick. It wouldn't surprise me if he sticks in the league for like 10 years. That guy is a really competitive, great player. But Walsh had a couple of possessions where he was on Jalen Wilson, and he switched between him and Grady Dick, and just took them out of the game down the stretch in the second half of that game with his length. And you could tell that it really threw Jalen Wilson off in the second half of that. And I think his wingspan's over 7'2". He's somebody that if he can get the shooting up, he's going to be a pain of a defender.
And he's a legit 6'6". Like I think he measured in at 6'6" without shoes. So, I mean, this is a big kid who can make, winning plays, right? And if you ask an Arkansas fan who their favorite player was on the team from last year, they'll say Walsh or Devo Davis, right? Those are the two answers. So they're not the two guys that are higher up on the draft board.
And with Walsh, I mean, I've like flirted with him as a first-round pick, but what's held me back is like the shaky jumper. So for teams that, we see him having success at the NBA draft combine, if teams are bringing him into group workouts or individual workouts and they're like, okay, he's finally figured out how to become a consistent spot up shooter. Like Walsh, his defense is going to be enough for him to get chances into a second contract, possibly a third contract. It's that good on defense. If the jumper is good, he's going to make a lot of money
Absolutely.
in the NBA and be on the floor like end of games.
Let me ask you this. If we did a redraft in the Herb Jones draft, would he be a first rounder? Would he be a fringe lottery player, do you think?
I think so, even though the jumper still is streaky. But he's improved it enough that he's not like a total liability. He can at least hit shots for you.
And you think Walsh is 19 years old. Herb was like 23 when he came into that draft.
Sure.
So you think, okay, 4 years from now, is Walsh going to be a dependable enough shooter? I think so. Are they going to bet on him? Probably. The question is how big. So
and the thing is, when you pull up Walsh's high school video, like he can do a little bit off the dribble. Like there's something there. He's not just somebody like who spots up and doesn't drive the ball at all. He can attack off the bounce for you and make the right pass, or just throw his body into the paint. He's unafraid around the rim. I think there's a real chance Walsh ends up one of the major steals if he falls into the second round.
Right, and they were, giving him Shane Battier comps throughout the year. I thought that was great, and I will say, if I just close my eyes, what team does he end up on? He feels like a Boston Celtic. I really think so.
Wow.
I feel like Brad Stevens would love Jordan Walsh, and I don't know how the workout went, but I bet it went pretty well. KOC.
I mean, we'll see. Early first round, lot of good fits in that early first round this year. I mean, you got Boston at 35. San Antonio at 33. If they get Wemby number one, maybe
good team. It feels like a good team's going to get him. It just does.
OKC at 37. Lot of good fits in that.
With his old teammate, Jalen Wood. Well, I guess not his old teammate, his old alma mater mate.
Absolutely. lot of options there for Jordan Walsh, and a lot of potential teams going for steals in the early second round. Kyle, Tate, thank you for joining me.
Thanks, KFC.
Thanks, man.